Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. It's a huge pleasure to be able to talk about this project. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's a privilege to be able to speak with my wonderful collaborator, Wayne Lawson, but also to be talk about the project itself, in part because I think it's a fantastic project on a really important topic, but also because of the wonderful team that worked on this project and really made it happen. So on the project itself, as I'm sure you all know, receiving a diagnosis of autism in adulthood is increasingly common for some people who might have either been misdiagnosed in childhood or who have missed out on a diagnosis entirely, leading to what some people have referred to as the kind of lost generation of autistic adults. And while we have some insight into the reasons why adults seek a diagnosis, much less is known about, what late diagnosed autistic adults' lives were like before they received an autism diagnosis, and especially how they might have, survived, thrived, or even experienced distress, while they were growing up. And this is important because there is limited understanding of, what a good life means to autistic people and which factors might play a critical role in making sure they have a good life. And so listening to and learning from the life histories of those who went through childhood without a diagnosis should serve better to inform, diagnostic practices and ways of improving the lives of autistic people, especially new generations of autistic people. So this project was co-produced with autistic adults and sought to do just that. So we invited late diagnosed autistic adults to share their life histories, to understand better the consequences of living without a diagnosis, to understand what precipitates an autism diagnosis, led people to seek a diagnosis in mid to late adulthood, and also to identify the perceived impact of receiving that diagnosis. And there were two really overriding approaches that we adopted in this project. And the first and foremost really was a participatory approach. And this really made this project be the amazing project that it is. It was a collaboration between non-autistic academic partners, autistic co-researchers, and an autistic advisory group who all actively participated in making decisions about the research. It's been fully guided by the experiential expertise of our autistic collaborators, who have made sure that the methods have been thorough, respectful, and supportive of our autistic participants, and also will ensure that the interpretation of the data is similarly respectful and attentive to autistic people's perspectives. So that's our participatory approach. We also adopted an oral history approach. So in oral history projects, the aim is to record recollections of people and groups, to preserve their stories and voices. And oral histories allow for a multitude of view and give a voice usually to individuals and groups who have often been marginalised in conventional histories, by allowing them to tell their stories in their own way. And while there's a kind of growing literature on qualitative research, examining the lived experiences of autistic adults, the use of oral history really tries to situate people's story at a particular time and place in history has rarely been used. So that's the approach that we adopted for this project. Now, this is what we did. I'm not going to go through this kind of complicated figure here, but this was just to show you that this was not a simple project where, we recruited people, we called them up in a few-minute interview to tell us about their story. This did not happen. This was a real process. So telling your life history is a big deal. And the project is really a testament and that we were really attentive to people's needs during the process. So that's just to show you the process, and the extent of the process. The results are still being analysed, But the team, the amazing team, managed to recruit and interview, you know, within a period of 8 months, 28 late diagnosed autistic adults from all around Australia. So these, to be eligible into this, to be included in this study, people needed to be over the age of 45 and to have received a diagnosis after the age of 35. And also to have, you know, spent most of their time in growing up and living in Australia. So there was a kind of, you know, select group of people from mid to late adulthood. And as you can see there, our mean age is 54 years, and people range from between 45 and 72 years. We have 2 72-year-olds. So that's where we are so far. I'm going to hand over to Wen now, who's really going to talk about the his own, but also researchers' reflections on being part of the project, and then we're going to talk about participants' reflections on being on their you know, experiences of being involved and telling their own life histories. So over to you, Wen. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. From the beginning, we met for discussion over everything from participant qualification through to means for locating participants. I have a number of resources we all did that we were able to work through. People were from varied walks of life from our team: history buffs, autistics researchers, professors, novice researchers, and so on. And inclusion was and is at the very heart of all that we were doing. We all appreciated how important the project is, and were equally committed to making it a success. So there was lots and lots of communication between us constantly. Next slide, please, Liz.
Oh.
Thank you. This meant things like traveling from wherever we were. I live in Victoria, so I would travel up from Warrnambool to Melbourne and then on to Sydney to meet up with the rest of our team, where we learned about equipment like cameras and tripods and recorders for recording oral history. We had a whole day together, and a bit longer than that actually, because we stayed over. And that was really important because we wanted to make sure we used the equipment properly. Lots of Zoom meetings to set up, discuss over things like ethics, who in the team would do which bit, and how we would organize interviews and so on. And from that came weekly Zoom meetings that eventuated, and mostly from the 2 research assistants, Gabby and Joanne, myself and Liz. And this was to check in on how we were going with the progress of the program, but also for debriefing. It's very interesting working with autistic people who are all very different, and we all had energy needs, we had sensory needs, we had lots and lots of questions that we needed to work through. So that Zoom time each Monday afternoon was very good. Thanks, Liz. Next slide, thank you. Some participant reflections on this process. Liz, did you want to read through some of these?
Yeah, I can read through some of them. I mean, Wen and I, in the last part of the project, Wen and I interviewed the participants about their experiences of the project. And so this is what they had to say. You know, they talked about their reasons for for actually wanting to take part and be able to tell their story. Some people talked about, you know, I just want to be able to add to that resource, that knowledge base. Just support people that are just newly finding out for themselves, just to get the understanding a bit more out there in the wider NT community. I thought this was another way of potentially trying to expand people's awareness, both of people on the spectrum and not on the spectrum. Another person said, so for me, it's wanting to make a difference, so my son doesn't have to go through what I've been through. And having survived, I think it's important that people know that people with autism can survive.
Yeah.
And finally, a couple of people talked about, you know, it was actually really important, the process for them and their own structured reflection on my life might be beneficial to me, help me dig a little bit deeper into my past and particularly my early history. And that was a really good thing.
Is there another slide, Liz?
Yeah. Do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
You do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So that on, and then they talked about on the actual taking part, and lots of people did talk about, you know, that it was really exhausting, draining, telling their story. Some people said that they slept for, you know, 14, 16 hours after having done it. It's a big deal. But having done that, they said, you know, I found with other people as well, the more I can talk about it to people who get it, the more my own acceptance is solidified. Well, there is relief about the diagnosis, but yes, sadness in the fact that there was so much more that I could have done in my life. And that's why I need to do this so badly for my own children, for anyone else who is doubting whether it's okay to talk about being autistic. And another person said, the more I said it, the more I thought this is all okay. My story is normal and it's good to tell it. And there's nothing, you know, I think when I was a child, there were autistic behaviors that I showed that I was made to feel ashamed of. And now I don't.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. And there was one, sorry, I must have missed a slide there. Do you want me to keep going, Wen?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we had, you know, these people were interviewed by autistic researchers, and we wanted to get a sense of, you know, what that meant for our participants. And, you know, this is what they said, you know, even made it more reassuring because I knew she'd get it and she'd get me. Another person said, knowing allowed me to drop the filters a bit more, if that makes sense. And then another person said, it just did provide an immediate sense of comfort that I could say something which would be difficult. Another person said about our autistic participants, autistic researchers, bloody wonderful. I have no objection to being interviewed by anyone that's not autistic. I'm not that sort of person, but just knowing that they were set another level of safety within it. If I'm going to offer something, I've got to feel safe about it. And finally, someone said, you know, I just feel a lot more comfortable about it because I think there's lots of stuff that happens when non-autistic people are making decisions about what's best for people with autism. Once you've read a little bit and got your head around what's going on, it's quite easy to see that it can be quite insulting, really. You don't know how my head works.
Yeah.
You might think you do, but you're not living my life.
Absolutely. And I think both Liz and I are saying a big thank you, and happy to take the questions when that's the right time.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.